Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, everyone. Ryan here. Today we are taking a quick dive into a recently released amp plugin from Audio Assault, the HellBeast. In the ever-expanding flood of Amplifier plugins, I decided to take a look at this one for a couple reasons. First of all, a few of you guys actually recommended this to me, so I appreciate that. This absolutely flew under the radar for me. I had no idea it came out, but once I saw what they were modeling, it definitely piqued my interest, so appreciate that. I was slightly familiar with Audio Assault, never really demoed any of their products before, so this is my first introduction to them, though I'd seen some of their releases in the past. But more importantly, I kind of wanted to make today's video a dual purpose review. Most of the time I'm really just talking to you, the viewers, in terms of consuming products. You know, this is what this pedal has to offer in terms of its value and how the price stacks up against the competition. This is the use case I'd recommend this for. But in this video, I'm also going to be talking to the developers a little more directly than I normally would. For a lot of this stuff, what you see is what you get, and it's done. You know, it's a finished physical product. With VST plugins and software in general, you do have the opportunity to make some changes down the road, which is good. At the same time, it's also a bit of a crutch in some ways because you can release stuff that may not be perfectly polished. And in this case, there are some, I think, glaring omissions and just simple mistakes that can be fixed to make something that will be a better product overall. So I'm also talking to Audio Assault in this video, so keep that in mind. It's going to be kind of a weird review in that way. So what the hell is the HellBeast? This is a high-gain amplifier simulation plugin, all wrapped up into a package with basically all the fixins that you would expect from, you know, competing products like Bias Amp or Neural DSP, where you've got a cab section, you got some outboard effects, Stompbox section, and you know, all wrapped up into kind of a single plugin that for a lot of people that will, you know, that's all you need for either rhythm sound or lead, without having to load up other effects in the signal chain. Of course, different plugins do that to different degrees of success depending on what they include, and this one is kind of in the middle ground, and I'll expand upon that later. What makes this super interesting, besides all the, you know, the package details, is that the amplifier is actually modeling the Randall Satan, which was probably pretty obvious to a lot of you guys that watch Ola England or are metal amp enthusiasts to begin with. Although the artwork is seemingly inspired by the 50-watt Satan, this is supposed to be modeled after the full-fledged 120-watt head, although that's probably not a terribly big deal, considering between the high-gain channels, the biggest difference is really the power section. So you're getting more or less full-fledged Satan tones in this plugin, which is a good thing, with a few caveats, and we'll certainly expand upon that as well. So the first thing I gotta get out of the way is pricing. It's a weird kind of concept with this plugin that I'm not really wrapping my head around. So I bought this plugin for $9 flat. I don't know how the hell you make money on $9. This was supposed to be like a pre-order price. I've kind of given my spiel on how much I hate flexible pricing for software. Especially when you get a discount for pre-orders, that kind of stuff. It's just stupid. I don't understand pre-ordering software anyway, especially if you can't preload it. It's kind of the only good thing about pre-ordering video games and different digital content anyway. But I think they're supposed to rack up the price eventually to closer to $25, $24-ish, and then they said there's going to be like a full-fledged price at some point of $45 to $50 at some point. I'm not even looking at it because, to me, just pick a price. Like, it's weird as a consumer when you're paying for the same thing at different pay levels depending on the time. If anything, it should start out at a certain price and get cheaper over time in my books, or at the best case scenario, if you add on a significant amount of features later on, then maybe charge a few more bucks here and there for it. But I do appreciate the low price. For comparison, you know, stuff like the Neural DSP plugins that have a similar sort of layout are running $100. And though a single Benjamin is only pennies on the dollar for the full-fledged gear these plugins are modeling, it's still quite a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people that are interested in VST plugins because they are more budget-oriented by nature. So I definitely appreciate something that is competitively priced, and I definitely appreciate Audio Assault's vision for, you know, their company trying to make stuff that is more affordable, especially in their local region of Mexico. It definitely makes sense. I think they've got a market for it. So applause there. I would just rather you stick with a price and be done with it. I think, you know, 20 bucks is still a very good value since a lot of individual amp head plugins are being sold at $10 or more. So from here forward, I'll be talking about my user experience as someone who runs Windows 10. Therefore, I can't necessarily say with 100% confidence that the issues that I take with this plugin or the things I like necessarily translate 100% to Mac OS. I'm going to, you know, work off the assumption that since they're on the same revision, then they should be pretty much identical. But maybe there's some issues that, you know, simply aren't there. So keep that in mind, strictly speaking about the Windows 10 version, but I think a lot of this stuff will still carry over. Upon loading the plugin up for the first time, you're greeted with a fairly slick looking GUI. I quite like the art style, though there's one thing that is apparently missing from this plugin that is of vital importance to me. That is any scalability option. So no matter which corner you drag or anything of that sort, it staying the same size, which for a lot of standalone plugins, you know, if you just get a standalone tube screamer or a standalone amp head, it's really not that big of a deal to me. Most of the time they're fairly, you know, readable, and a lot of this stuff is free, so I kind of give it a pass. For this though, for something that is costing money, you need to be able to have something that will adapt to, you know, display resolutions, and maybe I just want to be able to see the text easier. You know, who knows? I have good eyesight, not everyone does. I'm personally running this on a 2560 by 1080p screen, but if someone's running on, say, a Retina display on Mac OS, then if there's no vector scaling, it's probably pretty safe to say this window is going to be kind of small. So I would definitely recommend having something that is scalable. Even if the art isn't vector, I would rather have a slightly blurry upscaled image for something that's higher resolution than having no scaling whatsoever, because it works fine for me most of the time. I would still rather have this window bigger if I'm working in that plugin alone. And then of course have the ability to downsize it if I'm using anything else extra. Also a bit of a bummer is the toolbar you'll find up top. This thing fades in and fades out as you need it. Sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't. In this case, I'd probably rather have it fixed, or at least have the option to make it fixed. A lot of these features that we'll be going over, features in this plugin, I feel like are prioritizing the aesthetics of it rather than the usability, and I'm not particularly a fan of having this kind of stuff fade in and out for an audio tool at the end of the day. I really don't care how pretty your art is. If it doesn't sound good, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't, you know, if you're not able to use it quickly and efficiently, it doesn't matter. So I'd like to at least have the ability to keep that toolbar fixed. Though it is functional, once you have your mouse over it can just be a little cumbersome. So on the toolbar you'll find a standard gate, which works pretty well. Seems to be affecting the input of the guitar only, but you know, around -80 to -60 decibels depending on my guitar, works really well. You have the output, which this is basically your master out. There is no master volume or channel volume modeled on the amplifier itself, and I'll get into kind of some concerns about that on that section, but that controls your output. One setting that's missing from this section that I would like to see implemented is the input level. That's something that you can find on just about any decent amp plugin, whether it be, a standalone head or a, software package like this. And I like to use that for all sorts of reasons, whether I'm, balancing between a couple different guitars that have higher or lower output pickups and not having to change the rest of the amp settings to get there. It can act as a clean boost. If you want to do a lead sound without actually needing like a tube screamer or anything else outboard, it's very useful for having an all-in-one type of package. And in this case, it's really needed for reasons that, again, we'll go over in the amplifier section. You can also access all of the different sections of the plugin, including Stompbox, the amp cab, the effects. And over here is, I'm not quite sure, actually. I think this is supposed to be presets that you can make within the plugin. It doesn't work for me. I'm not sure if it doesn't work on all installations. It's one of those things that maybe it works on macOS, I'm not sure. But if you try to drag this, nothing really happens. So I'm not sure if you're supposed to download something extraneous and then put it in a folder and then maybe it'll pop up. Not a big deal to me because most, DAWs have their own presets that you can make within their own little windows. So like here in Cubase, I could save my own and just pull them up that way. But it's just kind of, not exactly the best look to have a feature that's there in your main toolbar that doesn't work. So hopefully that will get addressed. Now, to be clear, I don't mean for all that to come out as basic nitpicking. These are the sort of features I generally gloss over for 99% of reviews. It's like, here's your gate, in and output, they all work, moving on, because it's just kind of basic. It's kind of an industry standard at this point that if it's there, it generally just works, and it's something that you don't miss until it doesn't. So I think it's really important to nail these sort of basics because this is the kind of underlying foundation, the groundwork that users are expecting. So when they see that kind of stuff doesn't function properly, then it's a bigger red flag than even I think it deserves to be. Moving on to the meat of the plugin, starting with the Stompbox section, we have a single tube screamer model, and this is a good one. I kind of have my preferences depending on which standalone VST I'm looking at. There's a couple I like better than others. I like Mercurial's flavor of the tube screamer and the Mesa Boogie Grid Slammer versus some other ones, but depending on whether they're trying to sound like more like a TS9 or an 808 or whatever revision out there, then you might like some more or less. But this one, I think it's a good pairing for the main amplifier. Definitely spices up the sound for leads, and if you like using an overdrive for your rhythm sound like I do a lot of the times, and you can kind of smooth out some of those frequencies, get some natural compression in here. But to me, this completely defeats the purpose of the amplifier we're looking at for most rhythm work, but I'm glad they threw it in here. I'd like to see this expanded for the pre-section. A compressor would be cool. I know they talked about a compressor in my dealings with them through email. So either in the post or the pre-section would be nice, and maybe just a different overdrive altogether. Maybe something like a Fort and Grind type sound, or just a clean EQ type boost. Now for the star of the show, the amplifier section. This is supposedly Audio Assault's most accurate amp model to date, and I'm inclined to believe them because when I play through the HellBeast, I kind of forget I'm playing through a VST plugin. It's right up there with a lot of my favorite plugins and the Fractal audio products, in the sense like after 30 seconds, I forget I'm playing through something digital. It really has the right amount of response and feel, and of course on top of sound and sound quality. So big round of applause for the bass framework they've got going on here. This is a very good model, and I like the sound of the Satan anyway, so be able to have it in something that is that convenient and relatively portable is definitely nice. There are certainly some things I think they can improve. For starters, the girth grind gain controls, they're really good. They accurately capture the whole the Fortin philosophy on a lot of his amp designs. So you've got the low frequency gain, the high frequency gain. It's kind of like having a more versatile grind pedal in your arsenal, where you got kind of a tilt EQ thing going on, and that allows you to dial in anywhere from the tightest, chuggiest tones possible to something that's more relaxed classic plexi sound, which is really cool. Oddly enough, the problem I have with this girth grind gain system is that in this case, it's truly not high gain enough, which I never thought I would say about a Randall Satan-based amplifier, but it's true. No matter if I used EMG-equipped guitars, my Fishman Fluences, Lundgrens, higher output passives, it just sounds wimpy comparatively. It's okay for tracking, and for some rhythm work, it would definitely be enough, but you throw those settings on the Fortin NTS suite, and it's just screaming. Damn near uncontrollable amounts of gain, but it sounds great, saturated, and even on something like the Randall Thrasher, which doesn't have as much balls as the Satan does, at least the physical amp, then you know, it's closer to what this sounds like, to the point that I had to boost this by 12 decibels to get it to sound more the way I want it to. So I don't know where that level difference is coming from. I don't know if it's inaccuracies in the amp model input section, if perhaps in other VST plugins they're sneaking in some makeup gain in the input section just to bring it up to a level that, you know, a real amplifier would handle most of the time, or, you know, simply there's just other errors going on here. I don't know, but it definitely needs more gain, and, you know, for most people, if you're not going to use a boost pedal, and that's kind of the whole point of this girth grind gain thing to me. And this is especially where that input level would come in real handy, because I could probably look past that a little bit if I could just crank the input level of my guitar in the VST suite itself. Not a big deal to do it in an external plugin, but that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having all this in an individual package to begin with. So definitely needs more gain. I hope they investigate that, because I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one that thinks that. And then for the tone stack, bass, middle, treble, definitely really good, very versatile. You can capture all sorts of, you know, scooped modern metal sounds to, you know, kind of, like I said, the classic rock, plexi type stuff, because this is just a hot rodded Marshall, more or less, with some tweaks. So it works really well for that. One crucial missing feature from the physical amplifier not seen in this plugin, in my opinion, is the sweep knob. And if my understanding of it's correct, then that kind of acts the same way that the 3-position toggle switch does on the first channel of the Randall Thrasher, where it changes the center tone stack frequency a bit. And I find that most useful for dialing in different cabinets or making the overall sound of the amplifier shift without having to fine tune the EQ controls. If you kind of like where it's sitting, then you can just slightly tweak the overall voicing of the amplifier. And I think that's a feature that not only would it stand out versus other kind of Satan, you know, Natos-like plugins out there, and, you know, increase the value and the individualness of this design, I suppose. But also because there's certain areas, at least in that Thrasher switch, that I just don't like. So I'm not sure where they have that modeled in here. It's probably just dead at noon if I had to guess. But to have that tweakability would definitely be welcome, and again, set itself apart from the other designs. You also have the depth and presence control for the power amp, as well as the kill switch, which engages a bunch of gain and kind of sounds like high mids focus type thing. So if you're looking for even more rhythm gain, then you can get that. But even with the kill switch engaged, I still don't feel it has quite enough gain for my taste for a lot of the work that I want to do with 7 and 8 string guitars anyway. Apart from the missing sweep knob, you'll probably also notice that this thing's missing any preamp channel volume or power amp master volume controls, which is a bit disappointing, but I think I can kind of get it. Getting that sort of sag or preamp saturation feel the more you turn up the volume, the way they interact with each other, has got to be an absolute nightmare. So I get it, but it's one of those things that really makes some of the competition stand out in terms of feeling like a real amplifier, and it definitely gets overlooked a lot of the times. I feel with a lot of VST plugins, this included, they just kind of take a snapshot of what an amp sounds like at one point and then work from it from there. It's kind of a Kemper approach almost, and it definitely works. There's great sounds to be had with just the controls you see here, but at the same time, it doesn't really replace the real amplifier in that sense. And finally, as you probably noticed at the very beginning of this video, this is a single channel amp, means no cleans, which partly is a disappointment because I think a lot of these Randall and Fortin designed amps have some wonderful clean channels, some great American, Fender style stuff that just you don't see on a lot of high gain amps. Most high gain amps have a cool clean channel that does some neat stuff, but a lot of it just sucks in my opinion. So that's a bit of a bummer, but for two reasons I'll give it a pass. Number one, there's plenty of amp VSTs out there that are single channel that I love. My favorite one from last year was a single channel amplifier, and just like that plug-in, you can get some pretty good approximate cleans off of this as well. Dial back the girth and gain, especially the grind, and you'll get something that is really clean with just a hair of dirt on the attack. And it's a really cool kind of Marshall approximation thing. And you dial back the mids, crank the treble and the presence, and you'll get something that's a little more American flavored, especially if you play with the volume knob on your guitar. So it definitely works, but for most people that are interested in the Satan amp anyway, you're probably not going to care all that much. So it'd have been nice to see a clean channel, but I'm glad they're focusing on high gain if they're going to pick one. On to the next problem child, the cabinet section. This has a lot done right, a lot of cool things in here, a lot of really annoying shit too. So as you can see, just like with the toolbar, where if your mouse cursor isn't quite where it should be, the GUI just disappears completely. Now, if you're working directly inside this plugin, not a huge deal because you just keep it there and it's always there. But if you're like me and you're working with multiple tracks, and if you're tracking something, if you're trying to mix and match a bass guitar sound with a guitar sound, or you want to see what IRs you're using on another one, another instance of this plugin, then you kind of need to have that up at all times to be able to reference it. So I really don't understand the whole point of this fading out just to see some decent artwork. It needs to say there. Again, one of those instances of why are you sacrificing usability to be able to see a pretty picture? Don't do that. Just keep it fixed. Very annoying. You are able to use two different cabinets, so you can blend them at the same time. You can pan one left or right for stereo applications, very much like that. And you can bypass it altogether with this little button here. So lots of good basic stuff that you would expect to see there. They also include a lot of really high quality impulse responses, so you can scroll down through here and get stuff that a lot of companies would charge several dollars for, probably 10, 20, 30 bucks, that they're just thrown in here alone. They don't specifically say what microphones they're using or what the mix is. For a lot of players, they're probably not going to give a damn anyway because it's not necessarily all that useful. You kind of have to hear it to really understand what it means. So lots of usable stuff there. I will definitely applaud that. The problems start when you're someone like me who's collected hundreds, maybe thousands of high quality impulse responses that you use, with amp modelers or just any plugins in general to get something that is either easier to dial in from the start because that's kind of your home base sound, or because they just have cabinets and mic mixes and stuff that are included in the plugin. Simple as that. Or maybe you got a bunch of tone matches like I do. It's like, oh, I want to sound like Metallica Black Album on this song. Let's throw in the impulse response that kind of sounds like that. So here's the problem with that. I'm a Windows 10 user, like I said, but I run several hard drives and solid state drives. For instance, my operating system, which includes Cubase, which includes basically all the video editing software I use, and a few video games that I'm really concerned with loading times on. I have all that on a high-speed solid state drive. Lower capacity, but it's really freaking fast, and that's kind of the point you want for an OS and that kind of stuff. I have basically everything else, all the rest of my games, all my backups, all pictures, music, whatever, is on a selection of hard disks. So I've got my impulse responses on one of those hard disks as well, and it's really easy to get to. It's like a main folder in the D drive. I click on that, and then I've got like my own Hammer stuff, I've got my custom stuff, I've got stuff from different people, and it's like 3 clicks away and I have all the IRs I want in the world. Now on most IR convolvers, whether it be a free standalone plugin like NatIR, which is probably my favorite of the free stuff, or built into a VST plugin suite of some other kind, it generally goes something like this. So for this, you open an instance of a folder and you'd be able to scroll through them. But when you open this folder button, it takes you to a file browser to which you can explore your entire computer, which, you know, there's going to be a few slight differences on Mac OS depending on what you're using, but same general concept. So here, it can take me to the D drive. I look through the impulse responses. Okay, I've got a tone match I want to load up. There we go. I can use that one. And you can scroll through and it'll show you everything in that folder. So how does the HellBeast handle that? Well, you gotta kind of have a file browser system going on, but what happens is, okay, well, none of my impulse responses are there. Let's keep going. Well, that ain't it. Let's keep going. That ain't it. Keep going. All the way back until you realize, oh shit, it's just looking at one hard drive. So I'm only looking at the C drive here, which doesn't help me because I need to access my D drive. So in its current state, the only way I can actually use those hundreds, if not thousands of impulse responses I have is to copy a selection of those into the folder that this program is actually referencing. And I understand, I've talked with them directly, that, you know, coding a file browser like that is probably a nightmare between two different operating systems. So at the very least, what I would ask is that have something to where you can set a default folder for your IRs during installation, have it set a default folder for the impulse responses this program uses and merge it with the rest of the stuff, or at least have like an address up here that you can type in. You know, maybe I can just go through file browser, copy it, paste it, and then it'll go to that. That'd be fine too. I don't care how you want to get around it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a file browser, but that's what works best for my use. And it's one of those like standard things that you don't miss until it's not there. Fortunately, you can still get really good sounds with the stuff that's built in, but the cab section, as far as I'm concerned, probably needs the most work out of this entire VST plugin. It's a little rough around the edges. That takes us to the outboard effects, and I'm happy to say these are for the most part really solid. So they include a graphic EQ, which I really like because, as you can see here, I rely on graphic EQs in the loop a lot of the time for my sound. I'm used to having it on like Fractal firmware for tweaking, so it's a very good tool for both rhythms and leads as far as I'm concerned. The chorus is very usable. It's a little Eddie Van Halen flangery for my taste, but it's a good classic chorus, and if you dial, you know, in the mix back the speed and width and depth to taste, and you get something that's a little more you know, classic Roland Dimension sound that I like for clean choruses. But overall, very solid. The delay is equally usable, requires a bit more tweaking than the chorus, I find, but if you throw it in that 300, 500 millisecond range and tweak the feedback and mix to taste, and you get something that's really usable for both leads and cleans. And it kind of has that nice focused analog sound. It's not super high res on either end of the frequency spectrum, but really works well with the rest of the plugin. So very much like they included those two. The reverb is without a doubt the weakest of these effects. It's usable, but it's definitely not up to par to even a lot of the outboard effects that stuff like Cubase would include. And ultimately, if you want a really good reverb sound, I'd probably go with that. But it works, and you can get something that's like a decent room sound, but don't expect to make this thing sound like a Spring or a Hall or anything like that. It's just a basic built-in like solid state reverb sound, which is okay. And if you're going for the approximate cleans, it'll probably work for you fine. For me, I'm kind of picky about reverbs in terms of time-based effects. It's probably the one I actually really care about. So this one is, again, usable, just not as good as the other ones in my opinion. So that pretty much rounds out the full tour of this plugin. Before we hit the end of the video, let's take a few more listens to a handful of tones that you can craft using this plugin alone. Before I end this video, I think it's pertinent to say that the types of products I review are only the ones that I think I can add to the conversation in some ways. Either that there's something reviewers aren't saying, or that there is a use case that people aren't covering, or there's some sounds I think I can get, or there's value to be had in other ways. And that's why I honestly just turn down a lot of crap people give me. Either it's just a straight up bad product that I have nothing to say about, or it's just simply out of my wheelhouse and I have no expertise whatsoever in that subject area. And it's like, I don't know what to say, so I would do more harm than good. With this, unlike a lot of plugin reviews especially, where I can give a big thumbs up, this is more of, there's a good foundation here. I mean, rock solid foundation with a lot of this. And with a few, I think, minor tweaks that would definitely be doable for the 3-person team that is Audio Assault, keep that in mind, by the way, then, this would become something that I could really strongly recommend, even with a lot of the flaws I take with it, for $20, $25 even, adding that input, making these graphical UI features stick when you're looking at it, add something for the cab section that makes it a little more user-friendly, and making this amp just a little higher gain, in my opinion, is what it needs, or at least the option to make it a little more suited to what it actually sounds like in real life. So overall, there's great quality work here, but it's just really marred by some elementary misses that I think we're spoiled to in other competing products that makes it just like, ooh, that's an eyesore, or that hurts, compared to all the good stuff that's going on. So my overall recommendation would be, for most people, sit this one out for now. I think there needs to be some work. If you're absolutely dying for a Randall Satan sound on the cheap, this is a really good place to start. For me, I think here's the best way you're going to use this amplifier plugin though, is we're going to go here, we're going to turn that off, we're going to turn that off, we're going to turn all that off, maybe keep the GEQ, that's a good tool, gate, whatever, and we're going to use this just for the amp, and that's it. That's probably the single best part of it right now, because the usability of everything else combined does not justify this as an actual VST plugin suite. The amp head alone though is really damn good, and with a couple of those tweaks that I'd like to see, it'd be excellent, and it would be something that I'd have no problem using all the time. And what it excels at right now, I think $9 is about what you should spend on it. And then once they line out some of these other features that I hope, sincerely hope they get to, then it'll warrant that $20 to even $40 price tag that's still really competitive versus other products, and I think would be a kind of a must buy for a lot of metal players that are looking for this sort of amplifier sound. So yeah, a very light, big if recommendation for some of you out there. For most of you, wait this one out and let's see if this gets a little bit more polished. So most of all, I hope Audio Assault takes this stuff as all constructive criticism, because it's simply the reality of the market out there today with what you're competing with. So that'll pretty much do it. If you have any other questions, comments, concerns, as always, please leave them down below, as well as product recommendations. I can't get to all of them, but we'll surely take a look at the ones that I'm really interested in, like this one. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.